March 15, 2026. The night carried a kind of electricity that couldn't be scripted. The Academy Awards had always been about spectacle, fashion, prestige, carefully rehearsed gratitude, but this felt different. It felt heavier, as if something unseen hovered just beneath the polished surface, waiting to be noticed. Inside the Dolby Theatre, the lights shimmered across rows of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Designers, directors, executives, actors, people who shaped culture itself, sat dressed in perfection. Cameras glided like silent observers, capturing every angle, every smile, every carefully composed reaction. And then came the moment. Best Actor. A pause. You could feel it, not just suspense, but anticipation mixed with something harder to name. Michael B. Jordan. For a split second, time didn't move. Then applause erupted. But not the kind that explodes. Not the kind that overwhelms. This applause felt measured. Michael didn't jump up. He didn't shout. He didn't pump his fist in victory like audiences had seen countless times before. Instead, he stood slowly, almost cautiously, as if rising into a reality he wasn't fully prepared to step into. Have you ever seen someone achieve everything they've worked for, and yet look like they're carrying something invisible at the same time? He turned to his mother, gripping her hand tightly. There was no performance in that moment. No cameras could fake what was in his eyes. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "God is good." Then again, softer, almost to himself. "God is good." His voice trembled. His breath caught. His composure, so often unshakable on screen, seemed fragile. And that's when something shifted. Because this didn't feel like celebration alone. It felt like weight. As he walked toward the stage, every step seemed deliberate. The audience watched, but the energy in the room had changed. Something subtle, almost unspoken, was unfolding, and millions watching around the world felt it too. Why did this moment feel so different? When Michael reached the microphone, he paused. Not a dramatic pause. A real one. The kind that happens when someone is collecting not just their thoughts, but their emotions, their memories, their understanding of what this moment truly means. "First, I just want to say thank you," he began. Simple. Familiar. But then came the shift. He started naming names. Sidney Poitier. Denzel Washington. Jamie Foxx. Forrest Whitaker. Will Smith. Each name landed differently. He didn't rush through them. He didn't group them together casually. He spoke each one with care, almost like a roll call. And with each name, his tone shifted. Slightly. But noticeably. Why? Was it simply respect? A tribute to the giants who came before him? Or was it something deeper, a recognition of the path they all had to walk? Because if you looked closely, Michael's eyes didn't stay fixed on the audience. They drifted. Toward the VIP section. Toward the people who rarely get named on stage. The decision-makers. The gatekeepers. The architects behind the curtain. And that raises a question that few people ask out loud. When someone reaches the highest level of success, are they being celebrated, or are they being acknowledged? Because those are not the same thing. The speech continued, but something about it felt controlled. Not in a rehearsed way, but in a careful way. Like someone navigating a space where every word matters more than usual. "I stand here because of those who came before me," he said. A powerful statement, but also a layered one. Because what does it really mean to stand on the shoulders of those before you? Does it mean you're continuing their legacy? Or does it mean you're stepping into the same system they had to navigate? Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, what does success require? Talent? Hard work? Opportunity? Yes. But is that all? Or is there something else, something less visible, that shapes who rises and who doesn't? Because while Michael stood on that stage, holding the most prestigious award in film, something else was happening outside the theater. A different kind of reaction. A different kind of conversation. Katt Williams went live. No script. No filter. No polished delivery. And what he said immediately split the audience. "You see talent," he began. "I see a transaction." The word hung in the air. Transaction. It wasn't an accusation. it was an interpretation. And that's what made it powerful. Because suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about Michael's performance. It became about the system itself. What does it take to reach the top? Is success purely earned, or is it negotiated? Katt didn't talk about anything supernatural. He didn't need to. His message was grounded in something far more real. Power. Structure. Control. He called it a blood deal, but not in a literal sense. It was metaphorical, a way of describing the unseen exchanges that happen in industries where influence is everything. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That idea resonates with people. Why? Because deep down, many understand that systems exist. In every industry, in every hierarchy, there are rules. Some written, most unwritten. And those who rise to the top often do so not just by talent, but by understanding how to move within those rules. So when Michael stood there, emotional, careful, almost burdened, people noticed. And they started asking questions. Midway through the night, another layer added itself to the conversation. His film, Sinners. On the surface, it was a psychological horror. Dark. Intense. Symbolic. But underneath, it told a different story. A story about systems. About identity. About transformation. In the film, Michael plays a character who is offered everything he's ever wanted. Success, recognition, power. But the offer comes with a cost. Not an immediate cost. Not an obvious one. A gradual one. At first, the character believes he's in control. He believes he's winning. That he's beating the system at its own game. But over time, something changes. He starts to lose parts of himself. His voice becomes less his own. His choices feel less free. His identity begins to shift, not through force, but through influence. And that's what makes the story unsettling. Because it doesn't show destruction. It shows transformation. And here's the question that lingers. In real life, how often does success require transformation? How often do people adapt, reshape, and sometimes even compromise parts of themselves to fit into systems that reward certain behaviors? Because the truth is, this isn't just about Hollywood. It's about every structured environment. Corporate spaces. Politics. Media. Anywhere power exists, systems exist. And within those systems, there are expectations. So when Michael stood on that stage, many saw triumph. But others saw something else. A moment of entry. A moment where achievement meets expectation. And maybe, just maybe, a moment where celebration and pressure collide. Now consider this. The Oscars have existed for nearly a century. In all that time, only a small number of black actors have won Best Actor. That's not opinion. That's history. So when Michael named those legends, Poitier, Washington, Fox, Whitaker, Smith, it wasn't just tribute. It was context. It was acknowledgement of rarity, of difficulty, of what it truly takes to reach that moment. And that raises another question. If something is rare, does that mean it's exclusive by design or by circumstance? Because rarity often tells a story. A story about access. About opportunity. About who gets seen and who doesn't. Now think about the audience inside that theater. Executives. Producers. Investors. People who decide which stories get told, which films get funded, which performances get pushed into the spotlight. These are the invisible forces behind visibility. And while actors stand on stage, these figures shape the stage itself. So when Michael's eyes drifted toward that section, what was he seeing? Support, approval, expectation, or something more complex? Because here's the reality. No one rises alone. Every success story is connected to a network, a structure, a system. And systems, by nature, have rules. Some spoken. Most understood without being said. So let's ask the question directly. Who decides who wins? Is it purely artistic merit? Or is it a combination of performance, timing, narrative, influence, and alignment? Because awards aren't just about talent. They're about storytelling. Not just on screen, but around it. Campaigns. public perception, industry relationships. All of it matters. And when you understand that, moments like Michael's become more layered, more complex, more real. Because what we saw that night wasn't just an actor winning an award. It was a human being navigating the peak of a system, feeling the weight of everything it took to get there, and everything that comes with it. As the ceremony continued, conversations online grew louder. Some celebrated, some questioned, some defended, some analyzed. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire moment. It made people think. It made people ask questions. And in a world where most events are consumed and forgotten within hours, this one lingered. Why? Because it touched something deeper than entertainment. It touched the idea of success itself. What it means, what it costs, and what it requires. Because at the end of the day, the real question isn't about Michael B. Jordan. It's about all of us. In our own lives. In our own systems. What are we willing to do to succeed? What are we willing to give up? If we reached the top, would it feel like freedom? Or would it feel like something else entirely? That question lingered in the air long after the applause faded. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it had weight, the kind that settles quietly in your mind and refuses to leave. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments aren't the ones that give us answers. They're the ones that leave us standing still, caught between what we expected to feel and what we actually feel. And that's where the story becomes more than just a moment, it becomes a mirror. Because in real life, success rarely arrives in a simple, satisfying form. It doesn't neatly resolve the questions we've carried for years. Instead, it introduces new ones, deeper, more uncomfortable ones. At what point does ambition become sacrifice? And how much of yourself can you trade before you stop recognizing who you are? These aren't easy questions. They don't come with clear boundaries or warning signs. There's no single moment where everything shifts. No dramatic turning point where someone says, this is where it changes. Instead, it happens gradually, through choices that seem logical at the time. Opportunities that feel too important to refuse. Adjustments that appear small, even harmless. But over time, those small adjustments begin to shape something larger. One of the most powerful ideas in Sinners is that the system doesn't destroy artists, it preserves them. It elevates them. It gives them wealth, visibility, and influence. On the surface, it looks like empowerment, like success in its purest form. But there's a condition attached to that preservation. The system defines the image. It shapes the voice. And sometimes, it decides when that voice should remain silent. That's where the tension lives. Because what looks like freedom from the outside can feel like structure from within. Think about modern celebrity culture for a moment. How often do we see public figures carefully choosing their words, aware that a single sentence can shift public perception? How often do they operate within invisible boundaries, staying aligned with a brand, an image, an expectation? Is that control, or is it adaptation? Is it freedom, or is it a different kind of discipline? Michael's performance in the film captures this tension in a way that feels almost unsettling. It isn't just about acting, it's about inhabiting a contradiction. He described it as the most difficult role of his career, not because of the technical demands, but because of the emotional complexity. Why would a role like that be so challenging? Because it forces someone to explore what it means to lose control, while appearing completely in control. And that contradiction isn't just fictional. It reflects something real. On that stage, holding the Oscar, he stood as one of the most powerful actors in Hollywood. The room was filled with admiration. The moment represented years of effort, discipline, and undeniable talent. And yet, there was something else there too. Something subtle, but impossible to ignore. A flicker of vulnerability. A pause that felt just slightly longer than expected. An expression that didn't fully match the magnitude of the achievement. Why? Because reaching the top doesn't erase uncertainty. It doesn't silence the internal questions. In some ways, it amplifies them. When someone reaches that level, are they gaining power, or stepping into a system that already defines that power? That question matters more than we often admit. Because we tend to view success as a destination. A final point where everything becomes clear, stable, and complete. But in reality, success is not an endpoint, it's a transition. It moves you into a different environment, a different set of expectations, a different kind of pressure. And those pressures are rarely visible from the outside. Let's be clear, this isn't about diminishing achievement. Talent, dedication, and relentless work are real. They matter. They deserve recognition. But individual success doesn't exist in isolation. It exists within systems. And understanding those systems doesn't take anything away, it adds depth. It reveals the context behind the moment. It explains why something that looks simple can feel incredibly complex. Because the truth is, this dynamic isn't limited to Hollywood. It exists everywhere. In business, where leaders must balance innovation with stakeholder expectations. In politics, where influence often requires compromise. In media, where narratives are shaped as much by what is left unsaid as what is expressed. Even in everyday careers, people navigate structures, rules, cultures, expectations that influence how they grow and what they become. The difference is visibility. In Hollywood, everything unfolds under a spotlight. And that spotlight changes everything. It magnifies success, but it also magnifies pressure. It turns private decisions into public discussions. It transforms personal identity into something that can be observed, interpreted, and judged. And over time, that kind of exposure doesn't just affect how others see you. It affects how you see yourself. So when Michael stood there, holding that Oscar, it wasn't just a personal victory. It was a moment shaped by years of effort, yes, but also by history, culture, and an intricate network of expectations and influence. That's what made it powerful. And that's what made it complicated. Because beneath the celebration, there was a deeper question forming, one that doesn't belong only to actors or celebrities, but to anyone who has ever pursued something meaningful. What is the true cost of success? Not the visible cost. Not the long hours or the sacrifices everyone can see, but the personal cost. The internal adjustments. The quiet compromises. What do people give up, gradually, almost invisibly, as they move forward? And perhaps more importantly, do they even realize it while it's happening? Because here's the reality that often goes unspoken. There's no dramatic moment where someone signs away their freedom. No clear boundary that announces, this is the price. Instead, it unfolds slowly. A decision here. An opportunity there. A moment where staying silent feels easier than speaking up. A situation where aligning with expectations feels safer than challenging them. Each step makes sense on its own. Each choice feels justified. But over time, those choices accumulate. And by the time someone reaches the peak, the system is no longer something external. It becomes part of them. It shapes how they think, how they respond, how they navigate the world. And that's where the question becomes deeply personal. Because at that point, it's no longer about what was gained. It's about what was changed. So when the lights faded at the Dolby Theatre, and the applause softened into memory, something remained. Not just the image of a man holding an award, but the feeling of a moment that carried more than one meaning. It looked like triumph, but it felt layered. Not darker. Not negative. Just complex. Because success, especially at that level, is never a single emotion. It's pride and pressure. Gratitude and responsibility. Achievement and transformation. And maybe that's why his speech felt different. There was something beneath the surface, something that couldn't be fully expressed in words, but could still be felt. A sense of awareness. A recognition that the moment wasn't just about arriving, it was about what comes next. Because reaching the top doesn't end the journey. It changes it. And in that brief moment, beneath the performance, the expectations, and the spotlight, we saw something real. And real moments have a way of staying with us. They make us pause. They make us think. They make us question things we usually take for granted. So now, the question isn't whether there was a deal or not. That's too simple. The real question is much deeper, and much more relevant to all of us. Do we truly understand the systems behind success? Or do we only see the spotlight? Because if we only see the spotlight, we miss the story behind it. And if we miss the story, we risk misunderstanding what success really means. So maybe the goal isn't just to reach the top. Maybe it's to reach it with awareness. To recognize not just what we gain, but what we're becoming along the way. Because in the end, success isn't just about where you stand. It's about who you are when you get there. And whether, when everything is said and done, you can still recognize yourself in the reflection looking back.